Namaste. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopala Nandanaha Partho Vatsaha Sudhir Bhokta Dugdham Gitamrutam Mahad. All the Upanishads are like the cows. The one who milks them is Krishna, the cowherd boy. Arjuna is the calf, and men who are wise and pure drink the milk, which is the supreme, immortal nectar of the Gita. That was the fourth of the 9 verses of the Gita Dhyanam, which is a meditation on the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. The 9 verses offer salutations to the scripture for the divine knowledge that a seeker can acquire by studying it. The Srimad Bhagavad Gita, the living book, is one of the greatest divine gifts to mankind. It is an endless source of guidance, motivation, energy and power for everyone, anytime, anywhere, in all situations and forever. The Gita is certainly not a book of religious codes or commandments, but it is a systematic study of the human mind and other important subjects such as human nature, valor, social responsibility, crisis management, management principles, values, virtues, and of course, of the natural law of cause and effect, known as karma. The seeker is free to choose to perceive the scenario of war which forms the backdrop of this scripture, either as a metaphor or take it in a literal sense. The Srimad Bhagavad Gita, in fact, is a discourse by Krishna, and at the same time is also a discussion between Krishna and Arjuna about an internal spiritual battle against one's own ego. It can be called an externalization in the form of war of perennial inner conflicts. The analogy of war between an army of good people on one side and evil ones on the other calls for the usage of terms such as shooting, fighting, vanquishing enemies, and so on. Such an analogy and the story as a whole greatly helps seekers in being able to relate themselves better with the different characters and the situations in the story. The Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which are chapters 23 through 40 of the Bhishma Parva of the Mahabharata, is a transcript of the dialogue between Sri Bhagavan Krishna and Arjuna at the battlefield of Kurukshetra as reported to King Dhritarashtra by his charioteer Sanjaya. Many millennia ago, 2 rival families, namely the Pandavas and the Kauravas, fought the epic battle of Mahabharata. Duryodhana, who led the Kauravas, was the evil, greedy and cunning cousin of the Pandavas. He aspired to take over the Pandavas' share of the kingdom. It was the 10th day after the great battle of Mahabharata had begun. The blind king Dhritarashtra received the news about the fall of grandsire Bhishma. Dhritarashtra was shocked. He wanted to know what was going on at the battlefield. Dhritarashtra summoned Sanjaya and asked him to use his power of Divya Drishti, or the ability of remote viewing, and narrate to him what had happened and was happening at the battlefield. Sanjaya began narrating to Dhritarashtra all that took place at Kurukshetra and the entire conversation between Sri Bhagavan Krishna and Arjuna. Both the armies were gathered at the battlefield in the holy plains of Kurukshetra. There were brave and powerful warriors lined up on either side. The entire area was covered with chariots, horses, elephants, soldiers, weapons, and tents. Bhagavan Sri Krishna and Arjuna arrive on a beautiful and glorious chariot drawn by white horses. Bhagavan Krishna would be the charioteer and advisor of the brave Arjuna until the end of the great Mahabharata war. It was loud due to the war cries of soldiers, neighing of horses, trumpeting of elephants, and the blaring of conch shells. The 2 battalions were arrayed, ready to start the battle. Arjuna requested Bhagavan Sri Krishna to position the chariots between the 2 armies. Arjuna was deeply saddened to see on both sides his cousins, uncles, teachers, other relatives, as well as comrades. Arjuna was confused and bewildered. He wondered if the war was worth it at all. The strong mind of the valiant Arjuna weakened. He wanted to give up the war, surrender before his opponents, and walk away in peace. Depression, despair, and grief took control of him. He did not want to fight. His hands trembled, and his bow slipped from his hands. He was despondent, and he sat down on the seat of his chariot. His mind was shattered, and the feeling of dejection sapped him. He felt miserable, and his mind was drowned in sorrow. This dejection and despondency of Arjuna led him to approach his charioteer and guide, the Supreme Bhagavan Krishna. He surrendered before the Supreme Bhagavan as a devout pupil would do before his teacher, and acquired this great divine knowledge. The Srimad Bhagavad Gita begins with Dhritarashtra's question to Sanjaya. It is worth noting that the first word of the great scripture is dharma, as in the verse 1 of chapter 1, Dharma Kshetri Kurukshetri, and the last word mama in Matirmama, verse 1878, could be placed together to form the phrase Dharma Mama or Mama Dharma, which means my duty. It is the duty and responsibility of everyone to live a life of righteousness. Following the divine teachings of Bhagavan Krishna is a sure way to achieve this noble objective. Krishnam Vande Jagatgurum. Chapter 1, Arjuna Vishada Yoga, the despondency of Arjuna. The first chapter begins with King Dhritarashtra's question to Sanjaya the charioteer about what happened and is happening at the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Sanjaya the charioteer gives Dhritarashtra a detailed description of the scene at the battlefield. He recounts Duryodhana's request to teacher Dronacharya to take a look at the army of the Pandavas. Duryodhana names some of the brave warriors who are standing in their respective positions, prepared for war. They include Drupada, Virata, Yuyudhana, Drishtaketu, Chaitanya, Kashiraja, Purujit, Kuntiboja, and Shaibhya. His arrogance, supercilious attitude, and overconfidence lead him to believe that the army of his, protected by Bhishma, is limitless, but the army of the Pandavas, protected by Bhima, is limited. All of a sudden, conch shells, kettle drums, trumpets, drums, and horns blare, and the sound made by them is fierce. Then, seated in a beautiful chariot drawn by white horses, Bhagavan Krishna and Arjuna, the son of Pandu, blow their celestial conch shells. Arjuna, who is an experienced warrior, asks Krishna to position their chariot between the two armies in order for him to take a better look at all those he would be fighting. His emotions take control of him. He develops physical signs of being affected by sadness caused by attachment and other sentiments. He is saddened due to the fact that he would be fighting his cousins, uncles, teachers, and others whom he so dearly loves and adores. Many of us have faced situations in life when thoughts such as the following ones have crossed our mind. I have had enough. I can't go any further. I am frustrated and tired. In challenging situations, it is quite natural for people to look for reasons or in fact even contrive arguments to convince themselves that quitting would be the best thing for them to do. The valiant Arjuna too does so. He expresses his anguish to Krishna that the war would result in the deaths of soldiers and that would mean the destruction of their families. He also says that the ancestors of fallen soldiers would be deprived of offerings made to departed souls. He says that he sees no good in killing his own folks in the war. Arjuna informs Krishna that his mouth is parched and his skin is burning. He feels his bow slipping from his hands. He is on the verge of giving up the will to fight the battle. The Sanskrit term Vishada can be translated as disappointment, melancholy, despondency, lassitude, or despair. Sanjaya says to Dhritarashtra that after speaking such words, Arjuna laid down his bow and arrows and took his seat in the chariot, totally despondent. This despondency of Arjuna sets the base for the entire divine discourse by Bhagavan Sri Krishna. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga, the Yoga of Analysis. The second chapter contains the most important step that Arjuna takes towards finding a solution to his dilemma that weakened him. That life-changing step he takes is to concede before Sri Krishna that he is confused and that he needs guidance. By doing so, he shatters the barrier in his mind that has been in a state of denial and of cognitive dissonance blocking his intellect. When Bhagavan Krishna asks him a stirring question about his courage, he surrenders before the Supreme Teacher Krishna and asks him to be accepted by him as his pupil. The question Krishna asks is where such qualities of weakness that were unbecoming of honorable men came from and took over him. Krishna says that such qualities would prevent him from reaching higher levels in life and would get him a bad reputation. The Supreme Bhagavan asks Arjuna to refrain from giving into cowardice which is not manly and does not suit someone as valorous as Arjuna. He asks Arjuna to quit weak-heartedness and get up. This happened because Arjuna admitted before Krishna that he was confused and that he needed guidance. Bhagavan Krishna begins his divine discourse. Whatever you wish to do, start doing it by shedding fear and cowardice. Considering the worst-case scenario, death for all beings means the end of their physical existence. Although the event of death is the only certainty in life, most people fear it and do not want it to happen to them. A person who has considered the worst-case scenario in their plan tends to maintain calm in any situation because the element of fear does not weaken their energy and verve anymore. Krishna treats the topic of fear of death, which is a major psychological factor, right at the beginning of his discourse. A person who has shed this fear will fear nothing at all. As Krishna says, your weakness and cowardice will ruin your honor and reputation. The fear of death can make the strongest person weak. Understanding that the self is indestructible and eternal. Krishna says that the self is never born, nor does it die at any time. The self is formless, inconceivable, immutable, and unchangeable. For one who is born, death is certain, and for one who dies, rebirth is certain, and hence knowing this, there is no use in lamentation. The responsibility of everyone to do their duty and maintain composure while doing it. As if to remind Arjuna, Bhagavan Krishna tells him that being a Kshatriya, or soldier by profession, he should not falter in his duty to fight a war of righteousness. Shirking one's responsibility and refraining from performing their duty leads to a bad reputation. For people of honor, infamy is worse than death. The one who treats war or any action as a binary event and does not worry about the result strengthens his resolution to do his work well. On the other hand, a soldier who backs out of battle, either due to the fear of losing or due to any other reason, sins by not doing his duty and loses his standing as a warrior. Performing work remaining unattached to its success or to its failure. Bhagavan Krishna goes on to teach Arjuna the path of selfless action, which is the path of the yogis. He says that in the path of selfless action, even a little bit of progress can do a person a great amount of good. Have a single point of focus. Shloka 241. In this path, O Arjuna, there is a single point of focus and determination. The thoughts of the undecided are branched and are infinite. Having pleasure, wealth and power as the highest goals prevent a person from concentrating on the true ultimate goal, which is attaining to the Supreme Bhagavan Krishna himself. The most important principle of Karma Yoga is to work with no attachment to the results of one's actions and to refrain from inaction. Being established in yoga means maintaining a state of mental equanimity in which the actor is attached neither to the success nor to the failure of his work. A person who performs actions either with a selfish motive or to achieve gains is disappointed when success is not achieved, whereas a person with a balanced mind is not affected by success or failure. Achieving this state of mind frees a person from sense pleasures, which invariably end in misery and pain. Who is a sthita prajna, or a sage with steady consciousness? A sthita prajna is a self-realized sage with a steady mind who is neither disturbed by the threefold miseries nor is euphoric on achieving comforts, and is always free from attachment, anger and fear. The threefold miseries are: 1. Those that stem from the mind, 2. Miseries caused by other beings, and 3. Miseries caused by natural calamities and catastrophes over which no one has any control. Passion, anger and delusion stem from the lack of control over one's senses. The senses are very strong and can lead astray the mind of even the wisest person. Krishna describes the various states that a person's mind passes through before leading to their perishing. Shlokas 62 and 63 from the second chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Attachment leads to desires. Desires lead to anger. Anger leads to delusion. Delusion leads to confusion of memory. And when memory is confused, the person's intelligence is affected. And when intelligence is affected, there is self-destruction. Achieving serenity of the mind through divine consciousness is the way to destroy all material miseries and attain steady intelligence. Remove the fear of death. It is the only thing sure to happen in everyone's life. What sense does it make to fear something that is sure to happen? Developing spiritual knowledge requires meditation. A person without a fixed mind has no peace and therefore cannot find happiness. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3, Karma Yoga, the Yoga of Action. Duty and social responsibility. One cannot achieve freedom from reaction simply by not doing work, and one cannot attain perfection merely by renouncing work. No one can remain inactive even for a single moment because of the qualities born of material nature known as Prakriti. A person who controls his senses but always thinks of sense objects is a charlatan. Performing work as a sacrifice to Bhagavan Krishna frees the actor from all bondage and attachment. Great kings such as Janaka attained perfection through action for the benefit of the world. Bhagavan Krishna points out to Arjuna that whatever an important person in the society does, others emulate him, and therefore Arjuna should carry out his duties of a warrior and fight evil. A true yogi performs work with no attachment, but with the welfare of the world in mind. Who is the doer? A person whose mind is deluded with ego and arrogance thinks, "I am the doer." Krishna says that all actions of people are carried out by their gunas, or the three qualities of material nature in them. People act as per their own nature or gunas. Suppression is of no use because both attachment and repulsion rest in the senses. Instead of suppressing them, one should control them in order to avoid coming under their domination, because they are obstacles in one's path towards self-realization. Performing one's own duty imperfectly, and even death while performing one's prescribed duty, is far better than doing the work of others. Why does one commit sinful deeds? Why is it that good people too sometimes commit deeds that are improper or inappropriate? Krishna tells Arjuna that it is lust which stems from the Rajoguna, or the quality of passion which goes on to convert into anger. Lust is the all-devouring and sinful enemy of the material world. The senses, the mind and the self. Sense objects, the senses, the mind, the intellect, the self or the soul. Therefore, realizing that one's self is higher than the material senses, the mind and their intelligence, one must conquer the enemy which is in the form of lust and desire. This enemy is certainly difficult to conquer, but spiritual strength can help in conquering it. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga, the Yoga of Knowledge. The passing down of yoga. Bhagavan Krishna says that the yoga was handed down through generations of royal sages. However, in due course of time, the passing down of the yoga from generation to generation had been broken, and that the yoga was lost. Since Arjuna is his devotee and friend, he teaches him the eternal and supreme secret of the yoga of the relationship with the all-pervading Brahman. Krishna says that although he is unborn and imperishable, and although he is the Bhagavan of all beings, he does incarnate by his own Maya or divine energy. Whenever righteousness comes down and irreligion predominates, he manifests himself. In order to protect the righteous, to destroy the wicked, and to establish righteousness, he appears age to age. The divisions in human society. This is a highly misunderstood, twisted, and misrepresented matter. The Varnas, which are the 4 divisions of human society, are based on the aptitude and work of people that result from the disposition of nature or guna. The 4 divisions of social order are established on the gunas, namely sattvika, rajasika and tamasika, as well as their combinations in different ratios. The 4 divisions indicate the different levels of the orderly development of one's supreme consciousness. One's gunas are either brought along from previous janmas or are developed by people in a particular janma. Therefore, people tend to work according to their gunas. However, by developing supreme consciousness, they can alter their gunas. It is the attitude of a person that defines who they are. Just as a person who is physically strong but fears guns or detests killing cannot be placed as a frontline soldier in war, a person who is not good at math cannot be employed as an accountant. Varnas are not hereditary. We shall learn in chapter 15 that the attitude of a person is something that their Atman carries along with it from one janma or life as a particular individual to another. All individuals are different from one another. Even siblings who are born and raised in similar conditions show strong differences between them in their general attitude, intelligence, character and talents. This is because of the checked karmic baggage that they carry along with them into the new body before becoming a new individual, and not because of which community they were born into. The knowledge of this truth can help people who wish to make changes in their lives. All they need to do is to work on altering their gunas, and this would be followed by a change in their entire personality and life. This demonstrates that the divisions of society called Varnas have nothing to do with the detestable practice of social discrimination. Although varnas depend on the karma, gunas or attitude carried forward from previous janmas, they are fluid and can be changed merely by changing one's own gunas, working with no attachment to the result. Bhagavan Krishna confirms to Arjuna that he is not concerned about the results of the actions of people. People who truly understand Krishna are never bound by the karmic reactions of their actions. Krishna says that just as what ancient people who sought liberation did, Arjuna too should perform his duty in supreme consciousness. Action in inaction and inaction in action. Krishna teaches Arjuna the rather confounding concept of action in inaction and inaction in action by explaining to him what action, forbidden action, and inaction are. He who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is a wise one among people and is in the high position of performing perfect actions. No one can exist without action. Even the maintenance of the body cannot be done without action. However, who the doer of the actions is the question. A person whose every action is devoid of selfish desires and is burned by the fire of knowledge is known to be a wise and highly learned individual, and they know that they are not the doer. They therefore see inaction in action. They are aware that the automatic actions that take place in their bodies to maintain them happen even without any contribution from them. This helps them see action in inaction. One who has given up attachment to the fruit of their actions, although engaged in different kinds of activities, is content and independent. Such a person who has perfect control over his mind has neither greed nor the sense of ownership over things, and their acts are without any sinful reactions. Being unattached to the results and not claiming ownership lead a person to perform action to the best of their ability without any dilution of focus that could ruin the quality of their work. Bhagavan Krishna further reiterates the importance of being a modest seeker. Shloka 434. Acquire knowledge through reverence to teachers who have known the truth by serving them and asking them questions until all of them are answered. Burning karma through knowledge. Just as a blazing fire burns wood used as fuel into ashes, knowledge burns all actions and reactions or past karma due to material activities into ashes. There is certainly nothing more purifying than knowledge. He who is perfect in yoga finds it in the self in due course of time. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. Karma Sannyasa Yoga, the Yoga of Renunciation of Action. Arjuna asks Krishna, which is better, the renunciation of all action and devotional service, or yoga? Krishna says that both renunciation as well as the yoga of performing selfless action lead to liberation. However, among the two, the yoga of performing selfless action is superior to the yoga of renunciation of action. Bhagavan then defines the highly misunderstood term called sannyasi. A person who neither hates nor desires the results of his actions is known to be a sannyasi, or one who has renounced everything. A true sannyasi is a person who is free from dualities and is therefore liberated from material bondage. Being a non-doer, even while doing and yet staying clear of collecting karma. Bhagavan Krishna explains the idea of being a non-doer. A person who is devoted to the path of selfless action, has a pure mind or a purified soul, has his body and senses under control, is compassionate to all living beings and sees his self in them, although engaged in work, is never in bondage. A person of selfless action thinks, I am not doing anything at all. even while seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, going, dreaming, breathing, talking, giving up, accepting, while opening and closing the eyelids, knowing that they are the senses that are interacting with sense objects. One who dedicates all his actions to the Supreme Bhagavan and gives up all attachment to his works is untouched by sin, just as a lotus leaf is by water. Attaining peace by renouncing all attachment. A person who has nothing to lose has nothing to fear. Similarly, a person who has given up all attachments to the results of his or her actions attains the highest level of peace simply because they have nothing to lose, and also because their winning or losing makes no difference to them at all. On the other hand, those who are attached to the results of their actions are unsteady and are not free, living happily in the city of 9 gates. Krishna uses the analogy of a city with 9 gates to represent the human body with its 9 orifices. The one who has mentally renounced all actions and has perfect self-control lives happily in the city of 9 gates. Actions and their causes. The Atman, or the soul, is the master of the body, but it does not create activities or fruits of actions. All actions are produced by the gunas, or the 3 kinds of nature. This means that it is the general attitude of a person that is based on their gunas that causes action. Supreme knowledge, equality, and equanimity. When a man's intelligence, mind, and faith take refuge in the Supreme Bhagavan Krishna, he is fully cleansed of sins, and he goes into the path of liberation. Shloka 5:18. People who are wise treat equally a learned and humble Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, and even a person who cooks and eats dog meat. This teaching of Bhagavan Krishna extirpates the despicable caste system prevalent in some societies. The secret of eternal happiness and realizing one's own divinity. A person who is ever happy within, who rejoices within, and is illumined within, is a yogi who attains absolute freedom, total realization, and moksha. Such a person becomes one with the Supreme Bhagavan or Brahman. Those whose sins have been destroyed, whose minds are clear of doubts, and are always engaged in working for the welfare of all living beings, achieve liberation and absorption of the Supreme Bhagavan or Brahman. The wise who know Bhagavan Krishna, the Supreme Divine Bhagavan of all planets and deities, and benefactor of all living beings, as the purpose of their sacrifices and austerities, attain to him. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. Atma Samyama Yoga, the Yoga of Meditation and Self-Realization. The one who performs his obligatory duty, unattached to the fruit of his work, is a sannyasi and yogi who follows the way to attain ultimate consciousness. A sannyasi is not someone who has merely renounced action. A person who is attached neither to sense objects nor to actions and has renounced all thoughts is said to have attained to yoga. The mind is either a good friend or a terrible enemy. People must lift themselves with their own mind and should never degrade themselves. The mind is the greatest friend of the one who has conquered it. It is the manner in which one perceives an issue that makes them feel good or bad. A person who has conquered the mind has already reached superconsciousness. Such a person has crossed all dualities such as cold and heat, pleasure and pain, honor and dishonor, and is always balanced, peaceful, and steadfast in devotion. How can anyone disturb the stable mind of a person who does not care about any of the dualities mentioned? Bhagavan Krishna teaches the way to meditate. The first and foremost requirements to learn to meditate are that the person who wishes to meditate must have his or her mind and body under control, have a steady mind, should not have any desires, remain in solitude, and be free of lust, greed, and possessiveness. In order to practice yoga, one must create a seat on a clean spot, neither too high nor too low, place a soft cloth on it, and place some kusha grass on the soft cloth. There, the yogi must control his senses, purify his heart, and with his mind fixed on a single point, must practice yoga for the purification of the self. The yogi must hold his body firm, keep his head and neck erect, and stay perfectly still. He should look at the tip of his nose and must not look around. Peaceful in the mind, fearless, firm in the vow of celibacy as a true brahmachari, having control of the mind, thinking of Bhagavan Krishna with the mind in perfect balance, a yogi should sit having him as his supreme goal. Thus, always keeping the mind balanced, the yogi with his mind controlled attains peace abiding in Bhagavan Krishna, and this leads to liberation. It is important to be moderate in everything one does. Yoga is never possible for a person who eats too much, who does not eat at all, and who sleeps too much or too less. A person who is moderate in eating, in recreation, in sleeping, in working, in sleep as well as in wakefulness, destroys all misery through yoga. The omnipresence of divinity. A yogi whose self is united with divine consciousness sees the self abiding in all beings and all beings in the self. Such a person sees the same everywhere. A person who sees Bhagavan Krishna everywhere and sees everything in Bhagavan Krishna does not become separated from him, nor is Krishna separated from him. The restlessness of an uncontrolled mind. Arjuna says to Bhagavan Krishna that due to the restlessness of his mind, he does not see the steady continuance of yoga. He laments that since the mind is restless, turbulent, strong, and unyielding, controlling it is as difficult as controlling the wind. Bhagavan Krishna agrees that the mind is difficult to control, but assures Arjuna that through practice and dispassion, learning to control it is possible. The fate of a lost soul. What happens to a person who has failed to attain perfection in yoga, and what end does such a person meet? Arjuna compares such a soul fallen from yoga and meditation to a detached cloud and asks Bhagavan Krishna if a lost soul too would perish just like a cloud without no support. Krishna assures that a person who does good deeds never comes to evil and does not suffer destruction. Such a person who has done good, or rather has collected positive karma, is born again in the house of the pure and prosperous. One with excellent past karma is born in the house of yogis, which is a birth that is difficult to obtain. There, his previous divine consciousness is revived, and he comes in contact with the knowledge acquired in his former body. He then works even harder in order to achieve perfection. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. Jnana Vijnana Yoga, the Yoga of Knowledge and Realization. This chapter teaches the ultimate truth and describes the God principle. There is nothing superior beyond Bhagavan Krishna. Everything is connected to him like pearls on a thread. He is the sweet flavor in water, the radiant light of the moon and the sun, the primordial root syllable Om in the Vedas, the subsonic element of the sound of the ether, and the valor in humans. He is also the fragrance of the earth as well as the heat of the fire, the vitality of all living beings, and also the tolerance in people who practice austerities. He is the origin of all living beings, the intelligence of the intelligent, and the splendor of the powerful. He is the strength of the strong who are uncorrupted by desire and attachment, and in all living beings he is the energy of procreation that is not against righteousness. Whatever manifestations there are of sattva, rajas and tamas, they have all come from Bhagavan Krishna. However, he is not in them, but they are in him. The three gunas of Prakriti, and not knowing Krishna to be situated above them as the immutable Supreme Bhagavan, delude the entire universe. The divine Maya of Bhagavan Krishna with the three gunas of Prakriti is definitely very difficult to overcome without knowing this truth about him. Four kinds of devotees of Bhagavan Krishna. Among the pious, there are four kinds who are devoted to Bhagavan Krishna. They are the distressed, those seeking knowledge, people desiring material gain, and people of wisdom. Among those, the one of wisdom who is engaged in devotional service is the best. Bhagavan Krishna is dear to such a knower, and he or she in turn is dear to him. Bhagavan Krishna says that while all the four are noble souls, the one of wisdom who is connected to him is with him, because he or she is solely engaged in aiming for him as the highest attainment. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8, Akshara Brahma Yoga, the Yoga of the Supreme Truth. Krishna says that Brahman is Akshara, the ultimate truth, the imperishable and the Supreme One, and that there is no one above him. It may be noted that although in some verses Bhagavan Krishna refers to the Supreme Truth in the third person, it is none other than himself that is that Supreme Truth. The power of Brahman, which is manifested in every body as the transmigrating self or jiva, is the Adhyatma. Action which brings all life into existence and also sustains them is called karma. The constantly changing and perishable nature of the material aspect is Adibhuta. The Purusha, or the cosmic soul, which is the basis of all divine manifestations, is Adideva. Bhagavan Krishna alone is Adiyagnya, the one object of all worship which people perform with their body and mind. There is no doubt that whosoever thinks of Krishna alone at the time of death and leaves the body doing so, certainly attains to him. Does this mean that after a life of indulgence and adharma, all one has to do is to think of Krishna at the time of death and easily attain moksha? Well, the answer is yes, but the problem is that at the moment of death, the thought that occurs to a dying person is one that they have always had in their mind. Thinking of Krishna all the time with deep devotion during one's life guarantees that the person thinks of him even during the final moments of their janma. He who at the time of death meditates with full devotion by the power of yoga and fixes his mind on his life breath between his eyebrows, concentrating upon the omniscient and most ancient ruler, who is more minute than an atom, has an inconceivable divine form, and is beyond the brightness of the sun and the darkness of ignorance, attains to him the Supreme Being Krishna. The cyclic model of the universe. By human calculation, 1 day of Brahma is equal to 1,000 cycles, Mahayuga, or 4 yugas each, and the night is also of the same duration. The wise who know this truth know the truth about day and night. When Brahma's day begins, all living entities come into being from their unmanifest state, and when Brahma's night arrives, all merge into the unmanifest state. This vast collectivity of beings is born again and again. In the night it is dissolved, and at dawn it comes into being again. Yet there exists higher than the unmanifest another unmanifest eternal who is not destroyed when all beings are destroyed. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9, Raja Vidya Raja Guhya Yoga, the Yoga of Royal Knowledge and Kingly Secret. Those who have no faith in this dharma and continue to consider the body as the self fail to attain to Bhagavan Krishna. They remain stuck in the path of samsara, which is the recurring cycle of repetitive births and deaths. Bhagavan Krishna pervades the entire universe in his unmanifest aspect. He is the source and support of all objects and yet is not influenced by them. Just as the mighty wind moving everywhere rests in the ether, all beings rest in Bhagavan Krishna. All beings enter into his nature at the end of a cosmic cycle or kalpa, and he sends them forth again at the beginning of the next kalpa. The entire cosmic manifestation undergoes changes of creation, preservation, and dissolution. Great souls who are endowed with divine qualities take shelter in Krishna and know him as the immutable source of everything. They adore him with single-minded devotion. Others who work on the cultivation of knowledge worship him, the all-inclusive Supreme Brahman, in his universal form. Some see him as the universal oneness, not different from them, while others worship him in his infinite manifestations. The glories of Bhagavan Krishna. The Supreme Bhagavan explains to Arjuna of his infinite manifestations. He is the father of this world, the mother, the dispenser of the fruits of actions, and the grandsire, the one thing to be known, the purifier, the sacred Om, and also the Rig Yajur and the Samavedas. He is the supreme goal, the sustainer, the Bhagavan, the witness, the abode, the shelter, the friend, the origin, the dissolution, the foundation, the treasure house, and the imperishable seed. He is immortality and also death personified, the spirit as well as matter or existence and non-existence. To those people who worship him exclusively, he gives his assurance that they get what they want and preserve what they have. Those who worship other deities with faith are also worshipping Krishna, but they are doing it without true understanding. Krishna is the enjoyer and Bhagavan of all sacrifices, but those who do not know him in reality fall into the world of mortals and revolve in the cycle of birth and death. Those who worship deities go to them. Those who worship ancestors go to their ancestors. People who worship ghosts and spirits go to them, and those who worship Krishna will surely go to him. Offering everything as a sacrifice to Bhagavan Krishna. Bhagavan Krishna tells Arjuna that whatever he does, whatever he eats, whatever he offers in sacrifice, whatever he gives, whatever he practices as austerity, he should be doing it for Krishna and as an offering unto him. By doing so, he would be freed from the bonds of action that result in good and in bad. By being free and with his mind guided by the principle of the yoga of renunciation, he will attain to him. Bhagavan Krishna is the same to all living beings. He is not partial to anyone. However, those who worship him with love and devotion are in him, and he too is in them. Can the sinful worship Bhagavan Krishna? Of course, they can. Even the most sinful who worships him with exclusive devotion should indeed be regarded as a good person, for he has taken the right resolution. Such a person soon becomes righteous and he attains eternal peace. The one who is devoted to Bhagavan Krishna is certainly never destroyed. Who is eligible to worship Bhagavan Krishna? Anyone can worship Bhagavan Krishna because the race, gender, or social status of the devotee do not matter to him. Even those shunned by society can approach him, the supreme destination, and attain the highest goal. Bhagavan Krishna instructs Arjuna to fix his mind on him, be devoted to him, sacrifice unto him, and to bow down to him, because by uniting his whole self with him and taking him as the supreme goal, Arjuna will certainly attain to him. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. Vibhuti Yoga, the Yoga of Divine Splendor. Anyone among the mortals who knows Krishna as the unborn without any beginning, as the Supreme Bhagavan of the worlds, will be delivered from all illusions and sins. Intelligence, knowledge, clarity of mind, forgiveness, honesty, self-control, happiness, pain, birth, death, fear and fearlessness, non-violence, equanimity, contentment, austerity, fame, beneficence, and ill fame are different kinds of qualities of beings that arise from him alone. The 7 great sages, the 4 ancient saints, and the Manus were born of his mind. It is from them that all of humanity is born in this world. He who truly knows the glory and power of Bhagavan Krishna attains unflinching yoga, and there is no doubt about this. He is the source of everything, and everything evolves from him. Knowing this, the wise worship him with absolute devotion. The minds of his devotees are fully engaged in him. Their lives are devoted to him. They attain great transcendental bliss by preaching about him to one another. To them who are ever steadfast in worshipping him with love, he gives the yoga of discrimination by which they go to him. Out of mere compassion for them, he resides in their intellect and destroys the darkness born of ignorance by the bright lamp of knowledge. Arjuna, who is so deeply awestruck by Bhagavan Krishna, admires him, saying that he is the supreme Brahman, the supreme abode, the supreme sustenance, the eternal, the purest, the most supreme personality, the original, the transcendental, the unborn, and the greatest. Arjuna asks Bhagavan Krishna to tell him upon which form of his he should meditate. Bhagavan Krishna is the self situated in all beings. Shloka 10:20. Bhagavan Krishna says that the self situated within all living entities is him, and that he is the origin, the middle, and also the end of all beings. Bhagavan Krishna further explains his divine glories. He declares that he is the seed of all beings, and that there is no being, whether moving or non-moving, that can exist without him. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. Vishvarupa Darshana Yoga, the Yoga of the Vision of the Cosmic Form. Arjuna now feels much better and clearer in his thoughts. He says that with the supreme spiritual and confidential explanation of the highest secret concerning the self, which Bhagavan Krishna had given him out of his compassion towards him, his delusion is gone. Arjuna then expresses to Bhagavan Krishna his desire to see his imperishable self in his cosmic form, the vision of the cosmic form of Bhagavan Krishna. Sanjaya, who has been narrating the events at the battlefield to Dhritarashtra, then says to him that Bhagavan Krishna, the powerful Lord of Yoga, reveals to Arjuna his divine and universal form in all its glory. The all-wonderful, magnificent, shining, the all-expanding and all-pervading form of Bhagavan Krishna is seen by Arjuna through his divine eyes. The splendor and dazzle of the great Lord are so great as if there were hundreds of thousands of suns in the sky. There at that time in one place, Arjuna is able to see the entire universe with its multifarious divisions, all to be united in the body of the Supreme Bhagavan Krishna. Then Arjuna, who is overwhelmed with wonder, with his hair standing on end due to ecstasy, bows with folded hands before the Supreme Bhagavan Krishna and says that he can see all deities and various other living entities assembled in the body of Bhagavan Krishna. Arjuna says that he can see Lord Brahma on the lotus flower, as well as Lord Shiva, many great sages and divine serpents. The wonder-struck Arjuna goes on to say that he can see Bhagavan Krishna with his crown, maces, discs, and his brilliant radiance glowing from all sides. It is difficult to see him due to the bright, blazing, and immeasurable sunshine like fire all around him. Arjuna expresses his belief to Bhagavan Krishna that he is the inexhaustible and supreme being to be known. He is the imperishable protector of the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal way of righteous living. Arjuna sees that the space between the earth and the heavens and all the quarters are filled by Bhagavan Krishna alone. Arjuna says, having seen your marvelous and fearful form, the three worlds are trembling with awe, O Paramatma. Arjuna, who is astounded by all that he sees, asks Bhagavan Krishna to explain to him who he is in such a powerful and fierce form. Krishna replies saying that he is the terrible time personified, the destroyer of people, and that he is now engaged in destroying the worlds. He says that even without Arjuna's participation in it, all the warriors lined up on the opposite side will be killed. Bhagavan Krishna then commands Arjuna, therefore get up and attain glory. Conquer your enemies and enjoy your prosperous kingdom. All these warriors have already been destroyed by me. You are merely an instrument, O Arjuna, the ambidextrous one. Sanjaya says to Dhritarashtra, having heard the talk of Bhagavan Krishna, the trembling Arjuna with folded hands and joined palms prostrated before Bhagavan and speaks the following in a faltering, fearful voice. Arjuna says to Bhagavan Krishna, you are the primordial supreme being, the ancient personality, and the supreme resting place in this universe. You are the knower as well as the knowable. You are the supreme one with infinite forms, and the entire cosmos is pervaded by you. You are the father of the entire universe, of the moving and the non-moving. You are the greatest spiritual master. No one is equal to you, nor can anyone be greater than you. You are the immeasurable and unequal power in all the three worlds. Asking Bhagavan Krishna for his pardon. Arjuna then remembers the way he has earlier addressed Bhagavan Krishna by the first name, or due to foolishness and because of not knowing his greatness or out of fun, might have been disrespectful towards him. He begs Bhagavan Krishna to forgive him as a father would forgive his son, a friend his friend, or a lover his beloved. The main principle of the Sanatana Dharma. Bhagavan Krishna completes the Vishvarupa Darshana Yoga by stating to Arjuna the prime principle of righteous living. Shloka 1155. The one who is engaged in doing my work and considers me to be the supreme goal is free from contamination of the mind with previous activities and doubts, is free from attachment, has no enmity towards any creature, and is friendly with every living entity, certainly comes to me, O Arjuna. End of chapter 11. Chapter 12, Bhakti Yoga, the Yoga of Devotion. Arjuna asks Bhagavan Krishna who among his devotees are better versed in yoga, those who worship him as Bhagavan Krishna or those who worship the imperishable and formless absolute Brahman. Bhagavan Krishna clarifies that people who fix their minds on him and worship him, being ever steadfast and endowed with supreme faith, are the ones regarded by him as the best of yogis. Those who worship the imperishable, the indefinable, the unmanifest, the omnipresent, the unthinkable, the eternal, the formless, and the immovable Brahman have their senses controlled, possess a balanced mind, and are engaged in the welfare of others, also certainly go to him. Using vigrahas for worship. In Shloka 5 of chapter 12, Bhagavan Krishna explains the reason why people need vigrahas or statues to worship him. He says that those whose minds are set on an unmanifest and impersonal absolute power face difficulties in reaching the goal. This is because people always identify with the body, and when there is no perceptible form, it is difficult to perceive. He adds, however, those who worship me, renouncing all actions in me, regarding me as the supreme goal, meditating upon me with single-minded yoga, and those whose minds are set on me, Arjuna, I certainly deliver them from the ocean of the mortal samsara, or that of births and deaths. Fix your mind and your intellect on me alone, and you will no doubt live in me hereafter. Difficulties in achieving concentration in the mind. Bhagavan Krishna gives ways to help people who find it difficult to concentrate. He says to Arjuna, if you are unable to fix your mind steadily on me, then by the yoga of constant practice seek to reach me, Arjuna. If you are unable to practice even this Abhyasa yoga, be intent on doing actions for my sake. For even by doing actions for my sake, you shall attain perfection. In the event you are unable to do even this, then taking refuge in union with me, with perfect self-control, renounce the fruits of all your actions. Achieving peace of mind. Bhagavan Krishna teaches Arjuna that knowledge is better than practice, meditation is better than knowledge, and the renunciation of the fruits of action is better than meditation. Immediately after such renunciation of the fruits of action comes peace. Renouncing attachment to one's actions helps in coming to terms with situations which could even be unpleasant in nature, and the moment one does it, there is peace in the mind. What makes a person dear to Bhagavan Krishna? Bhagavan Krishna describes the qualities of a person that can make them dear to him. It is a person who hates no creature and is friendly as well as compassionate to all and is free from attachment and egoism. Such a person who remains balanced in pleasure and pain, is ever forgiving, ever content, steady in meditation, possessed of firm conviction, stays self-controlled, and is always dedicated to me, is dear to me. The one who neither troubles others nor is agitated by the world and is free from joy, envy, fear and anxiety is dear to me. A person who is free from wants, is pure, skilled, dispassionate and untroubled, renounces all undertakings or commencements and remains devoted to me, is dear to me. He who is beyond joy and hate, neither grieves nor desires, renounces good and evil, and is full of devotion, is dear to me. He to whom foe and friend are the same, faces equally honor and dishonor, is the same in cold and heat, as well as in pleasure and pain, is free from attachment, to whom admonishment and praise are equal, is silent, remains contented with whatever comes to him, is not attached to the place he stays in, is of a steady mind full of devotion, is dear to me. Those devotees who truly follow this immortal Dharma as I have taught above, endowed with faith regarding me as their supreme goal, are exceedingly dear to me. End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13. Kshetra-Kshetrajna Vibhava Yoga, the yoga of understanding the distinction between Prakriti and Purusha, or matter and spirit. Arjuna, whose thirst for more knowledge increases, asks Bhagavan Krishna to explain to him about Prakriti and Purusha, which are matter and spirit, or nature and soul, the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna, or the field and the knower of the field, true knowledge and the goal of this knowledge. All beings are divine. Bhagavan Krishna is pleased with the eagerness of Arjuna to learn and gives him answers to his questions. Bhagavan Krishna says that the body is called the Kshetra, or the field, and he who knows it, the Kshetrajna, or the knower of the field. He then tells Arjuna the most important truth about the divinity of all beings. Bhagavan Krishna says that the embodied self, which is the Kshetrajna, or the knower of the field, is Bhagavan Krishna himself, and that knowing the Kshetras and the Kshetrajnas is called knowledge. The 5 elements of the field of activities. The field of activities is made of 5 great elements, which are ego, intellect, the unmanifest primordial matter in nature, the 10 senses and one mind, and the 5 objects of the senses. The 10 senses include 5 senses of knowledge, which are those of sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch, and the 5 working senses, which are speech, hands, legs, reproduction, and excretion. Desire, hatred, happiness, pain, the body, the consciousness of living, conviction, and the intelligence form the field or the kshetra and all its modifications. All that constitutes knowledge. Humility, being free from pretentiousness, non-violence, the virtue of forgiving, modesty, service of the teacher, purity, steadfastness, self-control, dispassion towards objects of the senses, also the absence of egoism, perception of the evil and misery in birth, death, and old age, sickness and pain, non-attachment, non-identification of the self with the family members and their wealth, constant even-mindedness in favorable or in unfavorable situations, unswerving devotion unto Bhagavan Krishna, resorting to solitude, avoiding bad company, persistence in seeking knowledge of the self, and a clear comprehension of the aim of seeking spiritual enlightenment are all the factors that constitute knowledge, and whatever is opposed to all that is ignorance. The eternal Brahman. Bhagavan Krishna then reveals to Arjuna that which needs to be known, after knowing which one attains immortality. He exists in the worlds, pervading everything. He, the Supreme Truth, exists inside and outside of all living beings, including all those that move and do not move, is subtle, is far away, yet near to all. He is not divisible, yet he exists as if divided in all beings. He is the creator, sustainer, and annihilator. He is the light of all lights, is beyond darkness. He is knowledge, the knowable, and the goal of knowledge seated in the hearts of all. Prakriti or nature and Purusha or spirit are without any beginning. All transformations of the body and the gunas are born of Prakriti. The production of cause and effect, also known as karma. In the production of the effect and the cause, Prakriti or matter is said to be the cause, and in the experience of pleasure and pain, it is Purusha or the individual soul that is responsible. Purusha or the soul seated in Prakriti or nature experiences the gunas, which are the qualities born of nature. The attachment of the soul to the gunas is the cause of its birth in good or in evil wombs. The Supreme Self. Yet within the body resides the Supreme Lord, who is also called the spectator, the one who permits, the supporter, and the transcendental enjoyer. He is the Paramatma, the Supreme Self, and the great Bhagavan himself. One who comprehends this truth about the Purusha or spirit, Prakriti or matter, and about the interaction of gunas is liberated and will not take birth again. Perceiving the self in the self. Some perceive the self through meditation, some do so by the yoga of knowledge, and others by the yoga of action. Others who do not have spiritual knowledge but start worshipping him after hearing from others certainly transcend the ocean of birth and death. The birth of a being. Wherever a being is born, either unmoving or moving, one should know that it is from the combination of the field and its knower. The all-pervading Supreme Brahman. Do not mistake your ego to be yourself. The person who truly sees is the one who sees the Supreme Soul or the Supreme Bhagavan existing equally in all beings. Such a person perceives the same Supreme Bhagavan dwelling equally everywhere, and he does not degrade his own spiritual well-being by mistaking his ego to be the self, as the way ignorant people do. He therefore reaches the highest goal, the self that is a non-doer. He who is a seer perceives that all actions are performed by Prakriti or the material nature that is born of the body and mind. He sees that the true self does nothing. One who sees the whole variety of beings resting in the One and spreading forth from that alone attains to Brahman. The imperishable Supreme Self is without any beginning and is devoid of the gunas or material qualities. Although it dwells in the body, it neither acts nor is tainted. Just as the all-pervading ether is not tainted due to its subtlety, the Self that is seated everywhere in the body does not mix with it nor is affected by it. The Lord of the Kshetram or field. Just as the sun that illuminates the whole world, the Self or the soul, which is the Lord of the Kshetram or the body, illuminates the whole field or body. Those who perceive through the eye of knowledge the distinction between the field and its knower, and also the release of liberation of beings from Prakriti or material nature, attain the supreme goal. End of Chapter 13. Chapter 14. Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga, the Yoga of the Three Gunas. Nature. Nature, or the great Brahma, is like the womb of Bhagavan Krishna, in which he places the impulse of creation, out of which everything comes into being. Of all species that are born in the womb called Prakriti, nature, or the great Brahma, Bhagavan Krishna is the seed-giving father. The Three Gunas. The three gunas or qualities are sattva, the quality of goodness, rajas, the quality of passion, and tamas, the quality of ignorance. They are born of Prakriti, which is nature. These qualities bind very fast the immutable embodied being in the body. The sattva guna. Of these, sattva, due to its purity, is luminous and healthy. It frees a person of all karmic reactions. Those of this guna are attached to knowledge and happiness. When the light of wisdom shines through every sense in one's body, it may be known that sattva is predominant. A person who meets with death when sattva is predominant attains the pristine worlds of the learned. The fruits of righteous actions performed in sattva are pure. From sattva arises knowledge. People who are seated in sattva move upwards. The rajoguna. Rajas is the guna or nature of passion. It is the source of desire and attachment. The rajoguna binds fast to the self residing in a body by attachment to action. When greed, endeavor for material gains, restlessness and longing arise, it is rajas that is predominant. A person who dies in rajas is reborn among those who are engaged in action attached to results. The results of action performed in rajas result in pain. The rajasic remain in the middle in the process of their karmic evolution. Tamoguna. Tamas is born of ignorance and deludes all embodied beings. It ends up in the binding of the self residing in a body through negligence, sleep, and laziness. The presence of illusion, darkness, recklessness, and delusion in a person indicate the predominance of tamas in them. Tamas leads to ignorance, negligence, and delusion. Those in the lowest guna of tamas go downwards. Sattva binds one to happiness, rajas to action, while tamas shrouds knowledge and binds one to idiocy. Sattva prevails over rajas and tamas, while rajas manifests itself by overpowering sattva and tamas manifests itself by subduing sattva and rajas. The one who recognizes the gunas alone as the agent in all actions and treats the self to be above the gunas achieves the divine nature of Bhagavan Krishna. People who transcend the three gunas are freed from birth, disease, death, old age and misery and attain immortality. Arjuna is now eager to know about a person who has transcended the gunas and therefore requests Bhagavan Krishna to explain to him how such a person conducts himself and how he moves beyond the three gunas. Bhagavan Krishna says that such a person who has transcended the gunas does not hate the presence of knowledge which arises from sattva, activity that is born out of rajas, or delusion that stems from tamas. He also does not long for them when they are absent. He remains unattached and is not moved by sense objects. He knows that it is the senses and the mind born of the gunas that act, while his real self remains unwavering in all situations. He who has transcended the three gunas is the same in pleasure as well as in pain, is established in the self. He is one to whom a lump of earth, a stone, and gold are no different from each other. He treats equally the friend and the unfriendly, and accepts praise and criticism with equanimity. He who remains unmoved in honor and dishonor is the same to friend and foe, and has renounced all actions by giving up claims of being the doer, is said to have transcended the three gunas. Realizing Brahman and becoming Brahman. Bhagavan Krishna proclaims that he is the abode of the formless Brahman, the imperishable and the immutable, of eternal dharma and of absolute bliss. He who serves him with unflinching devotion and transcends the gunas is fit for becoming Brahman. End of chapter 14. Chapter 15. Purushottama Yoga, the Yoga of the Supreme Spirit. Now that the discourse of Bhagavan Krishna has attained a much higher state of spirituality, Bhagavan Krishna explains to Arjuna about the Supreme Spirit. However, before explaining about the Supreme Spirit, Bhagavan Krishna gives Arjuna the analogy of a large banyan tree that has roots above and branches below, of which he compares the leaves to the Vedas and him who knows this to the knower of the Vedas. The entanglement of people in the bondage of action. Bhagavan Krishna likens the budding shoots on the branches of a banyan tree to sense objects that are nourished by the gunas, and says that its secondary roots stretch below in the world of men, producing action and entangling them in the bondage of action. For a person involved in worldly life, the actual form of the tree is not visible. He cannot see its origin nor its end. A man should have a goal to seek that highest state from which one does not return to samsara or worldly life. He can do so by severing the deep-rooted tree with the strong axe of non-attachment, and by fully surrendering and taking refuge in the Supreme Bhagavan, from whom the eternal process emerged. Freedom from pleasure and pain. Those who are free from vanity and delusion are victorious over the evil of attachment, dwell constantly on the self, have their desires completely turned away, and are freed from the pairs of opposites known as pleasure and pain, will certainly reach the eternal goal. The one who reaches the highest abode never returns to material life. Souls are a part of Bhagavan Krishna. Bhagavan Krishna announces to Arjuna that the souls in living beings are an eternal portion of himself. They are bound by their material nature and draw towards them the five senses and the mind. What happens to a soul after the death of the body it had earlier occupied? When a person dies, or rather, when the body dies, the soul, which is the master, leaves the body and acquires another one. The soul takes along with it the mind and the five senses from the body it has left, just as the wind takes different odors along with it. This could probably explain the existence of strong differences in nature and character among siblings born and raised in similar surroundings. It could also be the answer to the unbelievable abilities of child prodigies and savants. How does the Atman or the soul enjoy objects of senses? The soul enjoys objects of senses by making use of the senses of sight, touch, smell, taste and sound, as well as the mind. Ignorant people, bound by the gunas, cannot perceive the soul when it dwells in the body, when it enjoys sense objects, or when it leaves the body. However, people with the eye of knowledge can see it. Yogis who strive for perfection see him seated within themselves. However, those who have not gained self-control and have minds which are not purified cannot see him even after striving hard. Bhagavan Krishna says that the brilliance of the sun, the radiance of the moon, and the brightness of fire are his. Pervading the earth, he supports all beings with his energy. He is Vaishvanara, the power of digestion, and also the incoming as well as the outgoing breaths in all living beings. He is seated in the hearts of all beings. Memory, knowledge, and the power of reasoning come from him, and he alone is that which has to be known by all the Vedas. He is the author of the Vedanta and the knower of the Vedas. The two Purushas. Bhagavan Krishna then explains the two Purushas, namely Kshar, the perishable, and Akshar, the imperishable. All beings in the material world are perishable. The liberated ones, or Kutastha, are the imperishable. However, distinct from these is the Supreme Purusha, the highest self, or the indestructible Brahman, who pervades the three worlds and sustains all living beings. Since Bhagavan Krishna transcends the perishable world of matter and is even higher than the imperishable soul, he is celebrated in the Vedas as the highest Purusha. The one who knows the truth is undeluded and knows him as the highest Purusha. Such a person worships him with their whole heart and being. Krishna then tells Arjuna that he has taught him the most secret science, knowing which makes a person wise and all his duties are fulfilled. End of chapter 15. Chapter 16. Devasura Sampad Vibhaga Yoga. The yoga of the distinction between divine and demoniacal qualities. Except for the highly evolved, all humans have both good as well as bad qualities. However, there are some who have strong demoniacal qualities. Knowing the source of such bad qualities can help people get rid of them and develop good qualities and virtues. The two kinds of people in the world. 1. Those with divine qualities, and 2. Those with demoniacal qualities. Divine qualities. All that Krishna taught Arjuna thus far were about the divine qualities of people. They include qualities such as realizing and seeing the omnipresent and all-pervading divinity in all beings, respecting nature, staying unattached to the results of one's actions, performing all actions as a sacrifice to the Supreme Bhagavan, being friendly with all beings, and performing actions with social responsibility. Demoniacal qualities. Krishna says to Arjuna that after having explained to him the divine qualities of people in detail, he would explain to him about people with demoniacal qualities. He affirms that those with a demoniacal nature do not understand what to do and what to refrain from doing. They do not have purity, right conduct, or truthfulness. Such people believe that the universe is without truth, without a moral basis, and without God. The ruined souls with such views, a poor intellect, and cruel deeds arise as enemies of the world and threaten to cause its destruction. The demoniacal carry insatiable lust, and being full of hypocrisy, pride, and arrogance, they hold on to their evil ideas. They are deluded, and through their delusion, they work with impure thoughts. They are dominated by fears and anxieties, of which death is the only ending, and yet they regard gratification of lust as their highest goal. They amass wealth for the sole purpose of gratifying their senses. As they are bound by hundreds of ropes of desire and are driven by lust, greed, and anger, they strive to amass wealth using all possible unjust and unrighteous means with the main aim of satisfying their desires. The arrogance of the demoniacal. They are so vain that they think of their achievements and success as results of their greatness and imagine themselves to be most powerful. Their affluence makes them feel invincible, and they perform sacrifices to deities in order to acquire more power and amass more wealth. They are in a vicious web of delusion and the hell of being stuck in cycles of births and deaths. The demoniacal are confused with countless thoughts. They are entangled in a web of delusion and are addicted to the gratification of lust and greed, by doing which they fall into a dirty hell that is a never-ending cycle of miserable births and deaths. Such narcissistic, arrogant, ostentatious and perverse people, intoxicated with the pride of their worldly possessions, perform hypocritical acts of sacrifice which disregard scriptural principles. Being blinded by egotism, power, arrogance, greed and anger, these demoniacal people hate Bhagavan Krishna existing in their own bodies and also in those of others. These vile, reproachful, vicious and cruel haters are the worst among humans, and Krishna throws them into demoniacal wombs life after life in the cycle of life and death in the material world. This indicates that until and unless one makes corrections in their attitude, the same patterns will continue in their life, janma after janma. Taking birth in demoniacal wombs janma after janma, these deluded people never attain to Krishna, but fall deeper and deeper into conditions that are darker and murkier than ever. People who continue to be demoniacal continue to be trapped in a vicious cycle of miserable janmas. The three gates of hell. There are three gates to the hell of destroying oneself. They are lust, anger, and greed. These three should therefore be given up. A person who is liberated from these three gates of hell lives a life that is good for his soul, and he goes to the supreme goal. A person who disregards the teachings of the scriptures and acts under the influence of desire attains neither perfection, happiness, nor the supreme goal. The importance of following scriptures. The 16th chapter closes with Bhagavan Krishna's advice to let the scriptures be the authority and guide so that people know what they should do and what they ought to refrain from doing. Acquiring knowledge from the teachings of the scriptures and living as well as working according to that knowledge here in this world lead people towards the supreme goal. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17. Shraddhatraya Vibhaga Yoga, the yoga of the three divisions of faith. Arjuna poses another important question to Krishna. He asks about the condition of people who disregard the teachings of the scriptures but perform work with devotion and faith. He says that he would like to know if such behavior originates from the sattva, rajas or tamas gunas. Bhagavan Krishna explains to Arjuna that the natural faith of humans is also of three kinds, which are sattvika, rajasika and tamasika. The faith of everyone is as per his own nature. People are what the nature of their faith is. The faith of a person who is either wise or ignorant is according to the quality of his or her mind that is pervaded by samskaras, which are impressions from their past janma. Sattvanurupa, which is a term used in Shloka 1703 of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, literally means in accordance with one's mental attributes. Therefore, the faith of sattvika, rajasika and tamasika, or a combination of them that the mind is endowed with, is in accordance with the nature or guna of sattva, rajas or tamas, whichever is predominant in it due to past life impressions. However, those born with the rajasic or tamasic faith can certainly conquer their nature through sincere devotion, dispassion and discriminative knowledge, and can cause their faith to evolve into being purely sattvika. Worshipping practices of people born with the three different faiths. Those who are sattvic worship celestial beings of light. The rajasic, or the passionate, worship the yakshas and the rakshasas. The tamasic, who are deluded, worship the deceased, ghosts, spirits, and other elemental beings, torturing one's own bodies. People who are impelled by the forces of egotism, passions, and attachments practice terrible austerities which are not taught in the scriptures. Such senseless people, with their minds made up of tamasika, torture not only all the elements in their own bodies, but also the Supreme Being residing within it. They are people with demoniacal qualities. From this, it is evident that acts of self-flagellation are against the teachings of Bhagavan Krishna, and such acts imply disrespecting the Supreme Bhagavan Krishna residing in all bodies. This is why the body is called the temple of God, which needs to be respected, well cared for, and never abused. The three kinds of foods. Just as worship, austerity, and almsgiving are, even the foods that people consume are of three kinds. Sattvic foods, foods which augment life, purity, strength, health, happiness, and contentment, which are delicious, succulent, substantial, and agreeable, are dear to people with the sattva guna. Rajasic foods, foods that rajasic people like are bitter, sour, salty, stinging, extremely hot, pungent, and burning. Such foods cause pain, grief, indigestion, and disease. Tamasic foods, foods that are stale, tasteless, stinking, rotten, leftover, and impure are what tamasic people like. The three kinds of sacrifice. The sacrifice which is offered by people as taught in the scriptures without expecting any reward but with the faith to do it as a duty is considered to be sattvic or pure. The sacrifice which is offered with the intention of getting a reward and other benefits or as an act of hypocrisy is known to be rajasic. The sacrifice which is not in accordance with the scriptures, in which no food is distributed, no gifts are given, no mantras are chanted, and in which there is no faith is known to be tamasic. Tapas or austerity and its three kinds. Worship of the gods, the twice-born, the spiritual masters and the wise, a pure attitude, honesty, not causing harm to others, and celibacy are known as austerities of the body. Speech that does not cause offense, is truthful, pleasing and useful, along with the recitation of the Vedas, is called tapas or austerity of speech. The tranquility of the mind, inner contentment, silence, self-control, and purification of one's own mind are qualities called mental tapas or austerity of the mind. The tapas or austerity undertaken by devout people with absolute faith but with no desire for rewards is known to be sattvic. The kind of tapas or austerity performed in a pompous way with the objective of gaining reputation, honor, and adoration is said to be rajasic, which is unstable and impermanent. The tapas or austerity done with a foolish notion involving self-injury or causing harm to others is known to be tamasic. Charity of three kinds. Charity which is done to a deserving person at the right place without awaiting anything in return but as something that needs to be done as a duty is stated to be sattvic. Charity which is given reluctantly or expecting something in return for a favor or as a reward is said to be rajasic. Charity which is done at a wrong place and time to unworthy persons without respect or done in a disdainful manner is known to be tamasic. The threefold name of Brahman and uttering the divine monosyllable Om. Om Tat Sat is the threefold name of Brahman handed down by ancient wise people. From that name came priests, Vedas, and sacrifices. Therefore, as per the scriptures, the acts of consecration, generosity, and tapas, or sacrifices by followers of Brahman, are always begun by uttering Om. Being steadfast in sacrifice, austerity, and charity is called Sat. Work that is done indirectly for the sake of the Supreme Bhagavan is also called Sat. Sacrifices that are done, austerities, practice, or anything else done without faith are called Asat. They are of no use both here as well as after death. End of Chapter 17. Chapter 18. Moksha Sannyasa Yoga, the Yoga of Liberation through Renunciation. The second and the 18th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita can be said to contain most of the important teachings of Bhagavan Krishna. The second chapter could be called a preview, and the 18th chapter almost a summary of the entire divine scripture. The 18th chapter summarizes the entire divine philosophy imparted by the Supreme Bhagavan himself. The final chapter of this amazing divine scripture commences with Arjuna's question to Krishna about the distinction between the renunciation of action and the renunciation of the desire for the fruits of one's actions. Sannyasa and Tyaga. Bhagavan Krishna defines sannyasa as the giving up of desire-driven action and Tyaga to be the relinquishment of all fruits of action. The three kinds of Tyaga. Tyaga too is of three kinds. An action that is done as a duty, giving up all attachment to the fruit of the action or desire for reward, is considered sattvic. Relinquishing their duties for fear of physical troubles or because they are painful do not obtain the merit of renunciation because of its rajasic nature. Relinquishing obligatory duties is tamasic. The tyagi, who is a person of renunciation, is pervaded by sattva, is intelligent, has wisdom and conviction, never avoids works because they are unpleasant, or is attached to them because they are pleasant. It is impossible for a person to give up works entirely. Therefore, one who renounces the fruits of their actions is the one who has truly renounced and is a tyagi. The threefold fruits of action, which are bad, good, and mixed, accumulate even after death in the case of those who are attached to rewards, but not when one has renounced all attachments to rewards or to the fruits of their actions. The Sankhya system is the philosophy of spiritual illumination, which is the way to end all karmic reactions and the ultimate purpose of all actions. The five factors. There are five factors that cause action that have been declared in the Sankhya system. They are: 1. The body, which is the seat of action. 2. The ego that claims to be the doer. 3. The mind and the various senses. 4. The different functions performed by the being. And 5. The superconsciousness or the presiding divinity within. All actions that a person performs with the body, speech, or mind, whether good or bad, are caused by these five factors. A person who lacks spiritual intelligence is under the impression that the self is a doer of actions. Knowledge, the knowable, and the knower are the three impulses that motivate action. The three constituents of action are the instruments of action, the actual work, and the agent of the work. Knowledge, action, and the doer of the action are declared in the Sankhya philosophy to be of three kinds according to the preponderance of each guna in them. The three kinds of knowledge. The knowledge by which one sees the one indestructible reality in all beings, although divided in countless forms, is said to be sattvic or pure. The knowledge by which one perceives in all beings various entities of distinct kinds as being different from one another without any underlying unity is known to be rajasic. The knowledge by which one holds on to a single part as if it were the whole is baseless, without reason or without truth, and is known to be tamasic. The three kinds of action. An action which is done as per scriptures without attachment or hatred and without any desire for a reward is said to be sattvic. The action which is done with a selfish objective, is propelled by ego and pride, or with a lot of stress, is said to be rajasic. The action which is done in delusion, disregarding the scriptures and one's own ability, and without thinking of the consequences of loss or injury, is considered to be tamasic. One who is free from attachment and egoism is endowed with determination and enthusiasm and remains unaffected by success or failure is said to be of a sattvic nature. A doer who is driven by passion, is eager to receive rewards for actions done, is cruel, greedy, impure, and is affected by happiness and sorrow is said to be rajasic in nature. A doer who is materialistic, undisciplined, not steady, dejected, obstinate, inflexible, fraudulent, spiteful, indecent, lethargic and procrastinating is known to be of a tamasic nature. The three different divisions of the intellect and determination. The kind of understanding by which one realizes the path of work and of renunciation, what should be done and what should not be done, what needs to be feared and what is not to be feared, what leads one to bondage and what leads one to liberation is known to be sattvic. The intellect by which one incorrectly understands dharma and adharma, or religion and irreligion, and cannot distinguish between action that needs to be done and that which should not be done is known to be rajasic. The intellect which is in a spell of darkness or ignorance and causes a twisted mind through which dharma is perceived as adharma and adharma as dharma is said to be tamasic. The strong determination achieved through yoga to keep the mind, the life force and the senses under control is pure and sattvic. The will with which one clings to result-driven actions and to the gratification of the senses in duty, religion and in economic development is rajasic. The determination with which a stupid person does not give up sleep, fear, sadness, despair and pride is tamasic. The three kinds of pleasure. That which first seems like poison, but in the end is like nectar, is said to be sattvic. It is born of one's pure intellect, which is situated in self-realization. The happiness or pleasure, which is first like nectar due to the contact of sense organs and sense objects, but in the end is like poison, is said to be rajasic. The pleasure which shrouds self-realization right from the beginning until the end and is derived from sleep, indolence and delusion is declared to be tamasic. There is neither on earth nor in celestial abodes, not even among deities, a being that is free from these three gunas or qualities which are born of nature. By being devoted to one's work, one worships the Supreme Bhagavan, who is all-pervading and from whom all beings evolved. Performing one's work well is the path to attaining perfection. Bhagavan Krishna says that it is better to perform one's own dharma or duty imperfectly than to perform that of another perfectly well. People who perform their duty as per their own innate nature are not affected by sinful reactions. For example, a soldier who kills an enemy soldier while performing his duty of fighting for his country does not sin. Those who are self-controlled, unattached, and are free from desires attain the highest state of freedom from reaction through the act of renunciation, attaining to Brahman and supreme devotion to Krishna. Krishna then teaches Arjuna how a person who has reached perfection can attain to Brahman, which is the supreme state of transcendental knowledge. A person who is peaceful and sees the same reality everywhere and in all beings is fit to attain Brahman or superconsciousness. Having become one with Brahman, he is serene in the self, does not lament or desire, and is the same to all beings. It is in that state that a person attains supreme devotion unto Bhagavan Krishna, who can be known only through love and devotion. The act of giving up or of quitting also amounts to arrogance. Bhagavan Krishna informs Arjuna that saying, "I will not fight," amounts to an act of egoism. If he did have such a thought, he should know it to be a vain one, originating from his conceit, and that his nature would compel him to do what he, according to his nature, is supposed to do. Even the action that he does not wish to perform due to a deluded mind, he would involuntarily perform, being compelled by his own nature. The Supreme Bhagavan dwells in the hearts of all beings, and in accordance to their respective karma, he directs the wanderings of all beings by his maya or illusive power, as if they were mounted on a machine. This explains how people execute their own past karma and create either favorable or challenging situations for themselves, using one's own mind and intelligence. Bhagavan Krishna begins to end his discourse to Arjuna by asking him to fully reflect on the secret wisdom which is deeper than all that is confidential and profound that he has ever received, and to do what he wishes to do. This highlights the freedom of thought and action that follows of the Sanatana Dharma and joy. Everyone is free to do whatever they wish to do. There are no commandments or punishments. However, wise people who are aware of the law of cause and effect perform righteous actions and achieve great progress in the process of their karmic evolution towards attaining the supreme goal. Towards the end of his supreme discourse, Bhagavan Krishna encapsulates his prime teachings in 7 verses. The following 7 verses have been uttered by the Lord of Yoga himself. 1. Fix your mind on me. Always think of me. Be devoted to me. Sacrifice unto me, and you shall certainly come to me. This is my promise to you, as you are dear to me. 2. Giving up all your ideas of righteousness or religion, take complete refuge in me. I will liberate you from all sinful reactions or karma. Do not fear. 3. This confidential knowledge should not be spoken to those who are not austere, devoted, or engaged in devotional services. It should also not be revealed to those who are hostile to spirituality or to those who are envious of me. 4. The one who teaches this supreme philosophy to my devotees has the greatest form of love for me and offers to me the highest form of service. Such a person shall undoubtedly come to me. 5. There is no one who does dearer service to me than such a person who teaches others my philosophy, nor will there be another who is dearer to me than them. 6. I declare that the one who studies this sacred dialogue of ours worships me through the yajna of knowledge, which is the highest form of adoring me. 7. Even a person who merely hears this divine conversation with deep faith and without malice will attain liberation and the auspicious worlds of righteous people. Bhagavan Krishna's final words in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. The Supreme Bhagavan's final words in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in verse 1872 are in the form of a question to Arjuna. Bhagavan Krishna asks Arjuna, "Have you heard this with undivided attention, O Arjuna? Has your delusion due to ignorance been dispelled, O Dhananjaya?" The jubilant and enthralled Arjuna replies saying that his delusion has been destroyed and that he has regained his memory due to the grace of the Supreme Sri Bhagavan Krishna. He says that he would act according to the Bhagavan's divine word. Sanjaya then says that he has heard the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna that has been so wonderful that his hairs are standing on end. He expresses his gratitude to sage Vedavyasa, due to whose grace he has the power of remote viewing, known as Divya Drishti, which in a modern context could be compared to revisiting events from the past on a PC, smartphone or tablet. It is the power that enabled him to hear the most confidential and supreme discourse from Krishna, the Bhagavan of Yoga himself. Sanjaya then expresses his elation for having been blessed to visually perceive the most wonderful cosmic form of Bhagavan Krishna. The Supreme Scripture ends with Sanjaya's final statement in verse 1878. Wherever there is Krishna, the Lord of Yoga, and wherever there is Arjuna the archer, there is bound to be prosperity, happiness, victory, and righteousness. By the reference Arjuna the archer, Sanjaya means a devotee with the kind of devotion to Krishna that Arjuna has. Om Tat Sat. End of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May peace reign in your heart, mind and soul. May you stay blessed with good health, freedom, peace and prosperity. Krishnam Vande Jagadguru.